Hey, welcome to part 3 of this 1966 Dodge Coronet Hemi swap. That's right, this thing's getting a 6.4 liter Hemi that we got out of a 2020 Dodge Challenger. It's also got an HP 70 transmission, all electronic shift. This is gonna be an awesome car. But you might have noticed something in the last video. We left off right here with the battery, power distribution system. And that's what I generally like to do, is start with the power distribution system before putting the engine in, obviously. Do the power distribution system, get the battery right, get all your mains routed and going up to the engine compartment, your fuse box, your body harness, your engine harness, your trans harness. Make sure that all tests really good. And integrates well with the existing wiring system if you're going to do that, or if you're going to be changing the entire truck wire or car wiring harness, to do that as well. But you also want to do all your testing and make sure all that's integrated first very well and test out good before you install your engine, because once you install your engine, it makes things very difficult to change. So I did the power distribution system starting in the trunk here. And in the last video, you may have noticed, I don't know if you were keen enough to catch it, but I actually made a mistake. That's right, in the last video, I didn't have this piece right here. I went and fixed it, but you've got to have overload protection. And that's, I think, a mistake that a lot of people make is, I caught it, but I also had a couple people reach out and were more than happy to let me know that I made a mistake, but I did fix it here. But you can see I got this rotary disconnect here. It's all digital and stuff. And so I really like to put in a manual disconnect right back at the power source. And that just makes my life so much easier when you're troubleshooting things. You don't have to unhook any wires or anything like that. You can just flip the disconnect and then you've de-energized all the power on the car. But you always want to have your overload protection, like your primary overload protection, back as close to the source as possible. So in this case, it makes sense to put it back here. I guess I could have put it in under the hood, but what if something had happened to the cable along the way? Where would it have shorted out? It would have shorted the battery out, right? And probably have started a fire or something like that. And we don't want that. So I did go ahead and put in a 175 amp fuse back here. That fixed that problem. But in a moment, I'm going to take you through and show you what I've accomplished so far and then what is yet to do on this car. So stay tuned. So as you can see, I've got the power distribution system here, and I like to do as much anti-chafing stuff as possible and route your cables as, you want them up off the floor, because people spill things, they get in the way, they get a lot of chafing and stuff like that. So you just keep them as out of the way as possible. In this case, I didn't have a whole lot of options here. I didn't want to go cutting into this guy's trunk and mounting. It just wasn't in the budget to mount a separate wall, to mount all this hardware on it and close off a portion of the trunk to do all that. So I think this is tastefully done. It's within budget and it gets the job done right. And you've got good overload protection, you've got battery isolation, and then it's pretty feature rich in terms of a power distribution system. So overall, I think it's going to work out very well for this particular build. The feeders actually run through the trunk up here, and then they actually dive down behind the back seat, and then there's a channel on these B-body cars that's right in the door sill, and it's made for wiring to run along that channel up under the driver's feet and then penetrate through the firewall and into the engine compartment. And that's the same route that I used for these battery cables. And you can see I did 2 grounds, so I did a large @0 ground right here at the trunk, right off the battery, and then I ran a 2-gauge wire all the way up to the front of the car and grounded the battery directly to the front of the car as well. So it's kind of more like a grid grounding system. And I've been doing that on all my builds, and I have very, very good grounding systems in the cars, and instrumentation, lights, and things like that seem to work very, very well when you have a very good bond from your battery throughout the entire car. I guess you could bond your battery back here, and that probably would have worked, but what happens is the type of metal and alloys that you have some impedance with your grounding properties throughout the car. So if you ground it back here, and you were to like measure your resistance between, you know, the back of this side of the trunk over here and then over here, it would be very low resistance. But as you go through the different metal alloys, which is inconsistent throughout the build of this car, by the time you get to the front, you may have, depending on where you're going to be grounding on the chassis up there, you may have a little bit higher than desired resistance. And so that's why it's always just a good practice to just run a ground from the, if you're going to do a rear mounted battery like this, run a ground all the way up and bond the front of that car to the battery itself. All right, moving up here into the front of the car. Now, by the way, this shop is an absolute wreck, but generally I try to clean this shop up every Sunday to actually move everything out of here and even power wash the floor. I try to do that every Sunday or every other Sunday, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. But hopefully I get it cleaned up here pretty soon. So as you can see, I took out the front driver's seat to make room for a lot of laying down up underneath this dash. I've got to do the surgical task of tying in this Sublime Technologies Hemi harness, this quick run harness, into the existing B-body car electrical harness. Now, generally, I would like to replace the entire wiring harness throughout the entire car. In this case, that just wasn't possible, and it wasn't in the budget to do it for my customers. So anyways, it's kind of a surgical process. We've got a handful of wires that we need to get up underneath the dash from the engine compartment through the firewall up underneath the dash and tie into the existing wiring harness. And we've got to do that way as least intrusive as possible, so that we don't further decay the existing wiring harness or cause other problems. So I'm going to be up underneath here doing a lot of work. I've also got to fit the aftermarket fuel pedal, the throttle pedal, because this is a fly-by-wire, drive-by-wire throttle pedal. I actually have it over here. Let's look at this thing. So this throttle pedal came out of actually I think this was brand new, but this one would have been in like a Dodge Charger. Yeah, like a Dodge Charger or something like that. And I bought an aftermarket bracket right here that I don't even know who sells this, but found it online for like 50 bucks. And basically it's supposed to adapt this throttle pedal to a B-body car. And so the other half of the bracket is up underneath there. You can see that nickel plated or zinc plated piece of hardware. I already have it bolted up there, and then this is going to bolt to that. And apparently it's supposed to position the pedal in these B-body cars exactly where you want it to be for, as you know, a comfortable drive. So I pulled a lot of wires through. It's through the firewall. I've got grommets in place and all that good stuff. And as you can see, we're missing an entire steering column and steering wheel, and gauges are gone as well. So this car is getting full decoded digital gauge setup. It's going to get a new Flaming River steering column with tilt and all that good stuff, billet, tilt wheel and indicators and stuff like that on it. So it's gonna be a very, very nice steering column, and nice and solid. I mean, there's nothing worse than, you know, spending tens of thousands of dollars on a brand new front suspension, modern steering rack, and then having an old sloppy steering column. It just, why even, you know, have all those front end parts if you're going to have slop in your steering wheel, right? And so from your hand all the way to the wheels, it's going to be a nice, tight and firm feeling steering. So you get behind the wheel of this thing and it's going to be like driving a modern car. So I'm really excited to see how well this thing is going to turn out. But yeah, this is a total wreck underneath here. We've got to get this done. Up inside the console up here is where we're going to be putting that Sound German Engineering 8HP70 transmission harness. It's all going to be hidden underneath here. We've got to go drill another hole somewhere up here to get that wiring harness from here underneath the car and into the transmission. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I don't know if I'm going to drill a hole here or go through the firewall. There's already a hole up there to do that. So we'll see how we're going to do that. So let's go up front now. All right, again, pardon the mess. You can see I've absolutely been ripping on this thing. You can see all my cutoff wiring from all the splicing and all the new wiring I've been doing for the last couple of days in here. And I'm sorry I didn't film a lot of it. Some of it I did get filmed, and you'll see that here shortly. But a lot of it I just got to get ripping and get it done. And so moving the camera around, it takes a lot of time to do that. So as you can see, I got all my brake lines bent. This was all bleeded and done in the last video. These are 4 piston calipers, so they're not top of the line, but they are Willwood, and these are really good brakes. And overall, I'm very, very happy with how well this whole QA1 suspension and the Willwood brakes, how nicely this thing went together. I mean, really, truly bolt on. I mean, now there were some tabs and stuff like that in the way, and if you watched part 2 of this series, you would have saw me cut all those tabs off and start cleaning all this stuff up. But what's really cool is you got coilovers all the way around. Well, eventually we'll have coilovers all the way around on all 4, but this whole QA1 front sub assembly is, I think, well worth the cost. It's a premium product and it's got a premium cost. Okay, what else did I do here? So you can see there's some changes here. Let me zoom in on this guy right here. That is what used to be DIY Hemi has now changed to Sublime Technologies. And yeah, I know I had to mount it upside down, but that's what I had to do. You won't really see it anyways when the engine's in here. There's gonna be a lot of stuff covering that up. But that is the Hemi swap wiring harness or engine management system. And so that's gonna be controlling or the liaison between the computer and the drivetrain. And so that'll also do things like it has the relay for the start signal. It's got relays for your AC compressor. It's got relays in it for your cooling fan, trans fan, and all that good stuff. And it's got fuses and all that stuff in there. And so overall, I think it's engineered pretty well. And it's very, very easy to install. And it's very similar to things like Power by the Hour's control pack for the 5.0 Coyote, or Ford Racing's control pack for their Coyote and 7.3 Godzilla. Very, very simple to install, and you really just got a handful of leads you need to wire up. Like one of them is obviously your AC compressor. You got to wire that up into the car. What else? You got key on. So you got key positive, then you've got the crank signal, you got a ground, and then you've got battery power, I think. And it's really just 4 or 5 things, and it will make this Hemi fire right up, no issues. I mean, you use the stock harness, that's the stock engine harness that is on the 6.4 Hemi. And right over here, this bundle right here ties right into the new Sublime Technologies control pack harness that they sell you. So this right here will plug right into the computer. This plugs into the control pack, and then you've got some grounds, and then you've got power. This ties in your alternator and your starter right here. And this is the stock engine harness right here. And then there's also gonna be Let me zoom out a little bit here. If you notice, you've got the rear O2 sensors, and then you've got the 8HP70, the actual trans connectors. So this one right here, because this is an 8HP and it's electronic shift, it has its own and it has its own transmission management system. So it has its own computer and its own wiring harness, and that will have to get tied in to the Sublime Technologies harness, but we do that through a little communications cable, and I'll take you guys through that when we get there. But essentially this piece right here is going to get cut. I'm going to I'll shrink wrap every individual wire, and I'll loom it up out of the way right here. Essentially, the only O2 sensors that we're going to use are the front two, so this one and the one on the other side. And then we have a new transmission harness that's going to get routed and mounted here. And that's what I was saying is going to go inside the console inside the car. We did a couple other things in order to get this thing to fit inside that B-body car. As you can see, I don't have a lift in this shop, so pushing this motor up from the bottom up is very difficult, and in doing so, well, in order to go top down to make life a lot easier on me, I switched out the stock headers and put in these Blackheart log style headers. It's just going to make putting in and maintainability, or maintaining this car in the future without having to pull the engine, having these smaller exhaust headers on here are going to be much easier to work with. The other thing you got to do on the 6.4, what people don't know, no one tells you this until you start to do it, is notice that is a mid-sump oil pan, and these 6.4s that came out of the Challengers, they have a front sump oil pan. And so that front sump oil pan hits the QA1 front suspension, or even if you didn't do QA1 and you had the stock K-member, Mopar K-member that came in these cars, you cannot use the stock oil pan on the 6.4 Hemi. You got to go to a mid-sump or a rear sump oil pan. Well, that, my friends, is a lot easier said than done. And so this is my first Hemi swap, and so I started to research and learn all these things the hard way. If you're going to go from a front sump to a mid sump, obviously there's a few people that make some. Holley, Melodyne pan makes some. There's a couple others, or you could even use a stock rear sump pan from the 6.4 that comes out of the trucks, right? I chose to go with the recommendation from QA1, which is to use Melodyne mid-sump pan. If you're gonna do that, you've got to change the pickup tube to a mid-sump pickup tube. And if you're going to do that, now you've got, and it mounts to the main bearing caps and uses the main bearing bolts to mount that. So now here I am dropping the main bearing caps in order to put new studs in there for a mid-sump pickup. And so I had to go through all that, but got it done. It was, I did not expect to have to do that with this thing. So that was somewhat painful, but not the end of the world. I got it done. All this stuff is gonna work fine. Oh, and by the way, the other gotcha here is, let me walk around to the other side. Very important for you to know this if you're gonna be doing something like this, is that the stock 6.4 Hemi has the dipstick tube. Notice this is not the stock dipstick tube. Hear me out. So the stock Hemi dipstick tube goes directly into the stock pan, right about here somewhere. Goes right into the stock pan. Well, when you change this over, there's no hole for a dipstick tube. So what Chrysler did was they put a hole right up in here. You can kind of see it right there. And it's got a tab and it's blocked off from the factory. But it is an option. You can knock that tab out using a punch, and then you can put a dipstick, an aftermarket dipstick in there through that hole. And it seems to work pretty well. The problem is that it doesn't go down into the pan. It only goes into this flat part up here. So as long as you have oil up here, it's of course well covering the sump, so you should be good. You've got to kind of cut this thing to length to kind of get it where you want it, but The problem with these things is that you've got to make your own marks, and you got to do some trial and error to make sure you have the right amount of oil that's called for in these engines actually in there. So I got to do some work to make sure that that's right and measure things out, all that good stuff. What else? Some of the other things I had to do to get this to fit in that B-body car is there used on this 8HP70, there used to be some tabs right here that stuck out. I had to hack those off and polish this smooth on both sides. So there's these two tabs right here that got to get hacked off. And then this, this tube right here, it's just a vent, and it actually goes up and there's a vent up underneath the valve cover. Really, I probably could cut it right about here and just let it vent out some here somewhere. Probably wouldn't be an issue, but this vent used to stick straight up and it used to come up to about right here. So I actually pulled that out and used this one out of another style of transmission that actually fit this whole size right here, and I just tapped it in or pressed it in, and now I've got a 90 instead of a straight, and this seems to work a lot better and has a little bit lower profile. But as far as I know, that's really the only prep work that you have to do to get this thing to fit inside a B-body car. And what else did I do here? Not a lot else. I did some exhaust. Obviously, I put AC compressor on it and a GM style, well, the Holley power steering pump on this thing, and just used their kit, bolt-on kit. But yeah, that's it. So stay tuned. Make sure you watch the rest of part 3. I'm going to be going over a lot more of the wiring, the under the dash stuff, and I'll be sharing more of what I'm doing on this car versus doing the ASMR style of videos where I don't say anything. I've been getting a lot of requests from folks to actually talk through what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, just comment. All right, I really hope you enjoyed the montage of some of that engine bay wiring. What I wanted to do is take a quick break and talk about the Sound German Engineering or Sound German Automotive 8HP70 trans harness and transmission controller. This is a very specific trans controller that is made for the 8HP70 if you're going to be doing Hemi swaps where you've got a 6.4 and an 8HP70 transmission. The 5.7s and the standard transmissions The PCM can manage all of that, but when you get into the 8HP70, they have their very own trans controller, and you got to factor that into your build. So if you're going to be putting in a JK, some other type of Jeep, B-body, Coronet like this, or Charger Challenger, you're going to run into that issue. You can get this from Sound German Automotive. I think they're out of Washington State somewhere. And they've got a really good brand and a very good product here. This is something that they do very, very well. And unboxing this thing, I'm pretty happy with how the quality of this thing so far. I did not buy this directly from Sound German. When you do when you do your Hemi swaps and you buy your Hemi crate, or you're going to go to somewhere like Sublime Technologies and get your ECU flashed from them, and maybe you're going to get the quick run harness from them. When you do that, if you select in the drop down menu 6.4 Hemi, it automatically knows that you're going to be needing this guy right here. And so you can elect to buy it through Sublime Technologies, or you can buy it through another distributor. So what do you get with the kit? You get this PC USB programming harness. You get the trans controller. Now this is already flashed and programmed with the all the information, set points, and everything that you're going to need for this to work with your Hemi swap with a 6.4. You get the trans harness, like I said. You get some extra wiring. I think these are 60 inches long. We'll go over in a minute why you need these. But you have these, and you get a little bit of literature. And the quality of these engineering drawings right here are very, very, very good. So I can tell just by reading this, this diagram here that it was well validated. It was put together clearly by an engineering firm that really knew what they were doing. So I have pretty good confidence just by looking at the drawings that this harness is probably going to work. It's probably going to be correct when I install it, and that if any of the new stuff I have to add to this harness using this packet right here is probably going to work really good. So, but you never know. Anything can happen here. So this will be a test to see how accurate it is. But like I said, I have pretty good confidence by looking at these that it's engineered pretty well. And you get a, looks like about 7 or 8, maybe 10 pages here of instructions. And it looks well put together, step-by-step type form for dumb people like me to follow really well. So let's get into the harness and look at these connectors here and how does all this stuff work together. All right, well, here's the Hemi harness here. It looks like the way that this looming was molded, they separate all the functions and features into their own harness here. And what we're going to end up doing is actually removing this loom. Now, it's done pretty well, but it's kind of like a one-size-fits-all, and it's not, the way that this is loomed, it's not very customizable for complex applications. It's because a lot of this stuff isn't going to be used. Where we're going to be putting this is in a location that is very condensed. It's actually going to go in the center console along with the trans controller here. It's all going to try and fit down in there, so there's not a lot of room. So I'm going to unloom all this stuff and get it down to the bare wires. I'm going to end up consolidating some of this stuff into bundles without the loom on it, rolling it up and get it into a nice tight package, and then carefully securing those out of the way so it creates a smaller footprint. So in a moment, you'll watch me in time lapse. I'll speed through all this stuff and you can kind of see what I'm doing. But that's the overall intent, is to kind of get this stuff off here. And I do the same thing when I do coyote swaps with like the Power by the Hour harness. They do the same thing where they kind of have, you know, a one-size-fits-all way to loom things, and it's never going to fit everyone's application. And so the cleanest way to do is to strip it off and, you know, bundle up wires where they should go, where they make sense for your application. All right. So let's start here. You've got this connector. I'm not sure the exact name of this style of connector, but it looks like, I think it's a 56 pin or 58 pin connector. Not all of these are currently used. And what you'll end up having to do is open this connector up, pull this blank register off the front here, and you're gonna have to end up using these extra wires that they give you to run certain wires for specific tasks. One of those, for instance, is the brake pedal. For instance, if you don't wire this in, because it's an electronic shift transmission, when you go to click the button in the shifter and put it into drive or reverse or neutral, it's not going to work because you got to have that brake pedal depressed, and the trans controller will not know that the brake pedal is depressed unless you grab the right color wire here, and it's already pre-terminated on the wire. I don't know if you can see that or not. I think they've done a pretty good job of saving you some of the hassle by pre-terminating those. You simply need to open up the connector, poke that in the right pinout location, and then weave it through, and then you're gonna be applying a ground to those. And I gotta double check, and I'll confirm it maybe in the next shot on this video here. But talking with Russell on the phone, basically all of this I/O is going to be ground. So all of your outputs for relays that you're going to be wiring up and things like that are all going to be grounds, right? So you shouldn't have to apply 24. I'm back into my control automation, industrial automation days, not 24 DC, 12 volt DC is what I mean. You should only have to apply ground to these, but don't quote me on that just yet. Give me a moment to verify that. Okay, so that's where you'll do those. You'll reassemble this, put it back together. And then the first one in the first section of this loom right here, this is what it says right here is a laptop calibration connector. There is a partner connector that they give you with a USB port on it right here where you'll plug into your laptop. You'll plug this up, and that's where you'll do any configuration and programming that you'll need to do on this computer here. Now in the instructions, and I'll show that to you here in a second, and maybe I'll just throw it up on the screen, they do give you a web link right here to Powertrain Control Solutions. That's the engineering firm that actually designed this. But Powertrain Control Solutions, they're gonna give you a download, and then there's a, I believe that was it. They do give you a web link where you can download the tuning software. Here it is. PCS website, tuninginstall.exe. So you download this, and it tells you everything you need to do right here in the instructions. So I'm not going to go over it in that detail, but that is what that connector is for. The next set of loomed connectors here is going to be a chassis ground. For things like this, that are going to be going to a PCM, like a body harness or a computer or something like that. I'm sure a chassis ground will work, but I like to take those directly to the battery so that you don't end up with like signal impedance or anything like that, or a ground loop that could impact sensitive electronics equipment. But it does say chassis ground on it, so you could get by with it, I'm sure. The next wire here is going to be 12 volt battery positive, and then you got 12 volt switched. So you'll have to set up a relay so when you turn key on, not cranking, and when it's not running but switched on, that's going to be that right there. The next one in the loop here is a CAN bus connector. So you'll see how this thing connects here. But remember, you've got a whole PCM, your engine ECU right here, that's running your engine, and then you've got this guy right here that's running your transmission. Well, how are they going to talk together? There is a partner bung on, hanging off the engine harness from Sublime Technologies. And I can show that to you in a moment, or I'll maybe pop it up on the screen here. But that's where this right here will connect into. There's a couple of other ports in there, a couple other things that are plugged into that same harness, but you'll plug this in there. And that is how, that's basically the mechanism and method
and CAN bus is the communication protocol, but that's the method that these two guys actually start to talk together, okay? But that's what that port is for right there. What's the next one in line? Up, you got your OBD2 connector. Now, this may seem weird to you, but there are going to be two OBD2 connectors. One of them is for your trans controller, and then the other one is going to be for your engine controller here, your ECU. So up under the dash, when you mount these guys up underneath there, you're going to have two side by side. You're going to have one for your engine and one for your transmission, right? So two different ones, okay? What's the next one? This is the SFT. This is going to be connecting into the actual shift controller or the actual gear shifter. Electronic shift unit is what this will plug right into the back of it. So you can look at that plug right there. See? And then this guy right here. This one right here is going to plug into the back of the 8 HP transmission, and it's actually missing this piece, so you may recognize it now. I actually popped this off because look how big this thing is. It's going to be very, very hard to get that through a hole from inside the car to under the car and plugging it into the back of the transmission. So now it looks like I only need to cut like a 3/4 inch hole somewhere, probably in the firewall or something like that. Get this through there, then I can reassemble this part right here, put it back on the transmission. All right, so that's those are all the various and different connectors. I didn't mention this, but these are just inline fuses that they provide. I didn't even check to see if there's actually fuses installed. Let's actually look at that. Let's see. Yes, they give you a fuse installed already. All right, so you do get inline fuses for your key on and power signal. All right, so let's take a look at how we're gonna mount this thing in there. Well, first, I'll go through a little quick montage of me unlooming all of this and getting this all tidied up, okay? Have a look at this. So what I've done here is, look, it's not going to look like this long term, right? I just did this so that I have a much smaller harness to work with. See, like there's the whole harness now. Instead of having all these tentacles like flailing about everywhere, getting hung up in the door sills and in windows and stuff like that, and it's just a mess. So it's just you tidy things up, you get it out of the way, and you want to work on one thing at a time, right? So the next thing we really need to work on is identifying what wires do we need to add to this harness here. So let's go over and look at the drawings real quick, and let's see what needs to happen. All right, so look how beautiful these drawings are. I mean, fantastic, really nicely set up, and I like how they can put it all on one layer or one view here. It's very, very easy to read. And so you can see the primary pinout connector up here in the top right for the trans side, and on the top left you can see the TCM 2800, and that's that latching connector that we were just looking at a moment ago. And just justified of that, you can see all the individual pin locations there. So pin 1 looks like it is that brown blue pin 2, it's going to be a gray with a black tracer, gray with black tracer, gray with green, gray with light green tracer, gray with light blue tracer. And so you can identify the colors of the wires. So if you need to be oriented to the pin, what you're looking at here on the connector, you can just kind of match up the colors once you take this connector apart. You can match up the colors on the back of it, and you can see, okay, I see pin 1 is this color, pin 2 is this color. So now you can see how they're soldered in these individual the spaces here, and the orientation on the drawings versus the actual connector, so you know you're going to be getting it right. So let's go back down here to kind of like right in the center down toward the bottom, and you see these open brackets on the right side of this group right here. And so you see this signal ground TPS brake input, plus 5 volts, signal ground, RPM input, neutral safety, reverse lights, and speed out. Those are referring to these guys right here. That's going to be these extra bundle of wires that they've provided in the kit. And you can see how they're already pre-terminated here. I don't know if you can see that really well through the packaging. But they're pre-terminated, so they should slide into this connector and actually lock in relatively easily. We'll see how well that goes, but this looks like probably made by Eaton. Eaton Engineering is what I'm assuming. Either that or Siemens, one of the two, which both of them are pretty good connectors, and we shouldn't have a problem with them not latching in. In other cheaper connectors, for instance, military grade ones, those big round ones with the locking shoulder connector, those ones are horrible, but these ones aren't too bad. So you'll slide them in. You'll see here in a minute when I get to that. You'll slide them in and you'll hear them kind of click and latch in there. So what we want to do here is go back down here and find what are the inputs and outputs that we need to add to this harness. And you know, in some cases, if it were my vehicle, I would probably add all of these in there and then bundle them up and put them out of the way. For a customer car, things like that, when you do that, you could potentially induce issues by adding greater complexity to the system. If it's not necessary, especially for a customer car, then just don't do it. So what I really need to have here is my brake input. Remember, we said we need to be able to press the brake pedal and tell this trans controller that, hey, we're pushing the brake, and it's okay to unlatch the safety on the gear shifter so that we can put it into reverse, neutral, drive, back in the park, right? So you need that input. So we're going to be wiring that one in. And then the next one is going to be the neutral safety. So that is it's actually an output. So when the transmission is in neutral, it's going to basically send ground on this wire here. And then for what can we do with that? We can actually use that ground to latch in a 12-volt relay that will allow, when we go to start the vehicle, if we latch that in and close the relay by it being in either neutral or park, it latches in the relay and allows the key signal. So when we go to crank, the signal will pass through the relay and then it will go over to the Sublime computer and allow the engine to actually crank over and start. What we don't want to happen is if we didn't wire that in, and we wired the key the signal when you go to actually crank the key to get it to start, it will send 12 volts right to the starter, whether it's in neutral, park, drive, reverse, and it's something you absolutely don't want to do. You can damage the transmission, damage your engine, your vehicle by allowing that to happen. So we need to have good assurance that the vehicle is the transmission is in a safe state, essentially, right? And then finally, the last one that we're going to wire in is the reverse lights. So right now, with it being an electronic transmission, there really isn't a way for us to know whether the car is in reverse or not, because there's no mechanical lever on the side of the transmission. It's all internally and it's all electronic. So how do we put our reverse lights on, right? So the same thing here. And I'll have to double check here, but I believe this one also is a ground. So it's just going to send a ground on this wire, and we will have to install another relay so that when we land that on the ground of the relay, so that when we ground it, it latches it in, and then we'll run our reverse lights through that relay. All right, hey, I think we've been doing a pretty good job of thrashing and getting a bunch of stuff done on this build here. So I've got the shifter installed. We've got all this console stuff moved out of the way. Now, next is we're going to be trying to make all this stuff right here fit inside this console right here. So we're going to have to make a bracket, get this thing mounted in there, get our harness situated, cut some of this stuff to length, loom it up real nice, and make it look really pretty so it looks like a very well done factory job inside there. But all that's going to happen on the next episode, so stay tuned. I really thank everybody for joining in, and my apologies if this particular episode seemed a little drug out, but the next one's going to be awesome. We're going to be putting this in, and we're going to get started on mounting the transmission bracket in place underneath the car and getting the engine set in place. So you don't want to miss that one. Stay tuned.